So today is April the 26th of 2024. My name is Kyle Liston. I am an Army veteran, and today we will be introducing Dr. Zelda DeBoyes, and we're very happy to have you here today at the Rocky Mountain Regional VAMC.
Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So we'll get started on your interview here, and we're going to be talking about your lifetime chronologically. And so I'll begin by asking you where you were born.
Okay. Well, I was born in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and I was raised in Detroit, Michigan.
Okay. So how long after you were born were you raised in Michigan?
I left Mississippi at age 12.
Okay. So part of your childhood was spent in Mississippi.
That's correct.
Okay. And your early upbringing, did you have siblings?
Yes, I had 3 siblings, 2 sisters and a brother. I was raised by a very traditional Southern woman, so manners were a big deal.
Was your mother a single mom?
She was a single mom due to the loss of my father.
I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
Yeah. How long was your father with you?
I was maybe 4, 5, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any memories of your father?
Pictures.
You
Memories
have pictures?
of pictures, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, via
And
pictures.
Did your mother talk about your father?
She
a
did,
lot?
but she also remarried.
I
Yeah,
see.
Yes.
Mhm.
So,
And how was that growing up with a stepfather?
challenging because he wasn't a very kind man.
Okay.
There was some domestic abuse in the home. And that was one of the reasons why I ended up in Detroit, because my siblings were a little older than me, 10, 8, and 7 years older than me. So when they graduated from high school, they relocated to Michigan for jobs. And when they did that, they asked that I would be sent for the summer to spend time with them, knowing that eventually my mother would come to Michigan because I was there.
So did she eventually divorce and
Yes.
bring you to
Well, I don't know so much
Michigan?
if they divorced in those old days. They just left,
They
which was
separated?
a really good way to do things.
Yes.
Just walked out and never returned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how were your relationships with your other siblings?
Oh, well, I was the baby girl that was unexpected. So,
Okay.
So I was like adopted in their mind.
I see.
So there was a lot of harassment, but really they became, in many ways, almost like my parents.
Uh-huh.
You know, they became the individuals that raised me as my mother worked, and I think very fondly of my siblings. Yeah.
That's great.
2 are no longer with us, and 1 is institutionalized right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty heavy.
It is heavy. It is. I lost a sister and basically lost both sisters at the same time because my siblings lived together their entire life. And when one was diagnosed with cancer, it impacted both their lives. And I think my oldest sister began to lose a sense of reality after that. So,
Is she the one who was institutionalized?
yes, yes.
Yes.
So, yeah. So we're dealing with that. We're dealing with that.
So is that still affecting you?
You know, there's always a level of sadness when the people that you love are not enjoying life as you expect them to enjoy life, or you lose someone that you love. I mean, that's a loss that every day that person is no longer here, and that's a reality that your world changes when you lose someone that you truly love.
Yes. Yes. So tell me a little bit about your school years.
Well, I was a good student, an A student, until I discovered boys. I mean, most girls find that to be a reality. That was why we started Take Your Daughters to Work Day, because of that. I was good in school, and then in high school, I hung out a lot more than I should, and I couldn't imagine going to college, but my mother always felt that college was really important, that it was the true equalizer when it came to equality of races, that like the great B.B. King said, they can take everything away from you, but they can't take education. So it was very important to me that eventually I would get educated, but I came from a poor background. I had been in ROTC in my high school years, and that pretty much kept me in school. And so I found that that might be a choice for me. It was possibly an option. Hadn't made that final step that that's what I would do. And then immediately after school, I graduated at age 17. And my sister got me a job in a factory. And I basically said, oh God, hell no. There's got to be something better out there. So I went to the recruitment center, and they were all together. Initially, I was looking at the Navy. But the Air Force recruiter was better looking, much better looking. And so he said, come on over here and let me talk to you. And so joined the Air Force.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were enlisted when you first joined?
Yes, I
Okay.
was enlisted. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how was that for you?
Well, nothing prepares you for those 6 weeks of basic training. Nothing prepares you for the first day that you meet, that your life changes. I left Detroit, Michigan on a incredibly snowy day. It was like one of the worst storms we had in years. So we really didn't think we were going to get out of there. And so after being sworn in, we came downstairs to get ready for the bus trip to the airport. And there was a woman sitting there, and as I was walking past, I was like, God, that woman looks like my mother. And it was my mother.
It
And,
was your mother.
She had caught the bus downtown to give me a Bible and to tell me that she loved me and to take care. And so then we left that condition and went to San Antonio, which is Lackland Air Force Base, where many of the enlisted people will do their basic training. And it's balmy. The weather, it's nice, it's beautiful. It was, for poor black and white kids from Detroit, it was unbelievable. And so we're laughing and joking, having a good time, and then reality hit in the way of our sergeant, who barked a few orders, and that shut that down pretty quickly. And you all, you're veterans, so you know what those first 2 weeks are like. You don't get enough sleep. Someone's always yelling at you. You're dumb. You're stupid. You're ugly, and I'm this size. We're giving you a size 20 to put on in your uniform. It's a shutdown. It's a moment. It's a moment. Yeah.
So going back to your mom meeting you at the bus station, that is really special.
It was. At the time, my mother had come from Mississippi to spend time with my mother's older sister, my oldest aunt, and the reason why she did that is my aunt was probably the first person I ever heard of having breast cancer. And so my grandmother had come to Michigan to be there. And so my mother was pretty much taking care of my grandmother and her sister. And so I didn't get to see her as much. And that's why my sisters were in that role of being parent.
Right.
Which is always, when I reflect back, they were just pains in the ass. But when I reflect back, one was only 10 years older than me. The other was 7 years older than me. So at age 17, a 24-year-old was taking care of a mouthy, attitudinal 17-year-old. And so I reflect back on that time and think just how incredible those women were and what they meant to me in my life. So at that time I couldn't see it, so I couldn't wait to get out of Dodge. It was great to see my mother there at that time.
Yeah. Do you still have that Bible?
I do. Believe it or not. I don't read it, but I have it. No, I have it. Yes, I do.
That's
It's a
amazing.
little small Bible. Yes, it was a cherished item.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit more about school. What was your favorite subject?
Hanging out. Let's see. So my background is that one thing that we didn't realize the impact of integration.
Right.
So I came from an environment where your community were your educators. So my mother went to church with my teacher. So if I wasn't doing what I needed to do, my mother would want to know why, because she had a relationship with my teacher that once we integrated wasn't there, because I started going to schools where people didn't look like me and really didn't believe I should be there. And so that was something that I remember often, that there was an expectation that we would always do well. But it did change, that relationship with me in school. But I was an A student. And so when I went to Michigan, I went to a Catholic school because they felt that it was really important that I continue getting a good education. So when I got into the ninth grade, I went to a school that is well known in Detroit. It was Cass Technical High School, and you could only get in based on your grades. And so I had very high grades. By the time I graduated, though, I had a C average, so I went from an A student to a C student, because there was a lot of non-attending moments in my life, so I reflect on my youngest daughter. I have two daughters, and my youngest cut class a lot, and I could empathize with her, but didn't tell her that. So when I reflect back on what was really important to me in school, I was a math whiz. When I actually went to college, my math instructor really wanted to know if I wanted to major in math, and I was like, this is fun. I don't want it to become work.
Right.
And so I guess when I think of topics, that would be one that I truly enjoyed. And anything that really had to do with a little bit of writing. I can write with both hands, even though I'm right-handed. So I spent a lot of time doodling. But I was a class clown. I was.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie. It was fun. Yes.
Yeah. So what was the best prank you ever pulled?
Well, I only pulled the prank because the prank was pulled on me.
Okay.
And there's the statute of limitation is over. No, seriously. So our school was huge. I was told that I think a pickle factory, but it was a factory because we're talking about Michigan. And so there was a lot of factories, a lot of unions. And so it was nine floors. It was a huge, huge building. So we had an elevator, which you would get on, and there was an elevator operator, just like in the department store.
Okay.
And so now I'm thinking this young white male would not be lying for any reason. I'm an idiot ninth grader, and he asked me if I wanted to buy an elevator pass for 50 cents. And I was like, that's was a lot of money in the 70s. In my neighborhood it was. And so I gave him 50 cents. And so when I got on the elevator, I was trying to get close to the operator so I could show her my pass. And she just looked at me and says, "You don't need a pass for this elevator. You've just been had." So I was like, "Oh, great." So I sold it for $1 to another unsuspecting
So you got
idiot.
your money back and you doubled it.
That's right. The other thing that our school was a preparatory school, so there were a lot of fraternities and sororities that you could get in. And they were always doing something. They were always rushing. But one of the things that they did was fundraising. So they would sell a square of tissue for, 5 cents or 10 cents. Mm-hmm. And when I say we were poor, we were poor. I mean, we didn't, lunch money was all the money I got. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, my work background, thinking about what I did as a teenager. I could shoplift with the best of them, and I did. Mm-hmm. And so I did things with the sororities, and I was never rushing for a sorority because I just philosophically did not believe in that. Mm-hmm. But you must increase the bus. The bigger the better, the tighter the sweater, And so they were always doing something like that. They had their sweaters on and they had bras over them. This was the 70s, so there was a lot of revolution going on. And so that's how I got paid for lunch a lot of times, and Wednesdays was Ladies' Day at the theater. I spent a lot of Wednesday afternoons at the theater instead of in class. And so one day I came home and my mother was there, and so should have known. There was a lot of questions about how school was going, and I had this elaborate discussion about how classes were going. And so she goes, well, that's interesting because Daniel White called today. And I'm like, who's Daniel White? Who's that? And so she goes, you may know him as Mr. White. And I was like, my counselor called? Why would my counselor call? And so she goes, apparently you're not going to class. And I was like, my mother was someone that I know every bad word, and I knew it at age 2. I mean, it was just part of my education. So there was a lot of language used there, and I was promptly told that if I did not attend class, that she would be up there, and it would not be an interesting moment for me. It would be the most embarrassing moment of my life. So I did. I stayed in class for at least a few months, and as a matter of fact, I knew I had to stay in because I had to sign a paper when I walked into class. I had to sign a paper when I walked out. But through it all, even though I felt like I slept through most of that part of my education, I did get a decent education. And believe it or not, I joined the Air Force. I was stationed in Germany, which was my first base after basic training and tech school. And within 2 months of being in Germany, Bitburg, Germany, I was registered in classes. So, I mean, all the time I was listening to those messages, I heard them, even though, I was doing other activities. I heard those messages about how important education was, to the point that 15 years ago, I got my doctorate degree from the University of Denver. I raised an MD, a medical doctor, and my youngest, I think, followed in my steps because she also didn't like school, hated school, but is brilliant, and she's a paralegal, and so
that's awesome.
And works for one of the municipal courts right now. So I feel that I heard those messages and internalized them. So.
I want to back up just a little bit and ask you what the year was when you entered the Air Force.
I joined the Air Force in 1975. I was supposed to join in 1974, but my middle sister got ill, and my mother was concerned about, ill to the point that she had to be hospitalized. And my mother did not want more than one child out of the home. My brother was shot and killed when I was 16.
Oh my God.
And so that impacted our home life. And so she wanted to make sure my sister was well before I went into the military. And so it changed when I went in.
Yeah. I'm so sorry about your brother.
It was a moment in our life, yes.
Yeah. Do you still feel very connected to him?
I do. I would say about a year ago, I thought I saw him. I was driving and I actually went around the block. And by the time I went around the block, I realized if it was him, he wouldn't be the same age he was when he
Right.
died. So that was a reality. But this young man, just something about him reminded me of my brother, and it just caught me off guard. You know, I shed a tear. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Was there any family ritual that went on due to your brother's death? Did you have a church service that was special for him, or visiting his gravesite?
What we did, and I don't do it as much now. We really celebrated his birth, which was 2 days after Christmas, and we
Okay.
would do that each year.
Uh-huh.
That, you know, he was a good guy, well loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So, did you go to church with your mom when you were little?
I was born in the South. Of course, I went to church. Of course,
That was
I'm a
mandatory.
black woman. Come on,
Yeah.
of course, I went to church. Came from a large church family. My maiden name is Thomas, and my family was very involved in the not the founding, but the continuation of Bethel AME. Even I just went back last month for a family member service, and our family is very much involved in this church and has been for my grandparents, my mother's parents and my father's parents were very active in this church, and so our family members still go to that same church, so yes, but. So when my sisters then moved to Detroit and my mother went to Detroit, weren't as active in the church community, but then as my older sister got age, you know, what happens is, you know, you go back to the church, you know, as you get older. The church becomes a place for solace. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, are you still involved with the church?
No, I'm not.
You're not.
I'd like to think I'm more spiritual now.
Yes.
There are some things that I don't totally agree with the church community, and it's some of the basic things we've always agreed on. Someone takes a book and tells me I'm inferior based on my race, my gender, and if I were to be interested in a woman, there are things that are said by those that run churches that I have issues with.
Sure.
And so I'm a good person.
Right.
I believe in the foundation of the 10 Commandments, and I think that I've raised good children.
Yes.
The people that I surround myself with are good people. So I'm good. If I leave right now, if I walk out the store and die, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't happen to you.
I've lived a good life. I've lived a good life.
You look like you have a lot of life left yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle.
You're welcome. So when you went into the Air Force, you were talking about the basic training, and then you were transferred immediately to Germany.
Yeah, I went to tech school first, which was in Keesler Air Force, at Keesler Air Force Base, which is in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know that nowadays, if you join the Air Force, they are all about the education piece. That's where they stand now. Was that the case when you went into the Air Force? I
believe so. I'm not saying that we're the best branch, but we are. But okay. We're the thinking branch.
We need that.
So school was very important to us. So when I went to basic training, I knew that I was going to go into the admin piece. Mm-hmm. And so the class that when I went to tech school, there was actually a sergeant there who was Black, African American in the 70s, whatever we were being called at that time, who met with those that were in my class that looked like me and basically said to us, he had high expectations, that he expected us to take our education and the service seriously, and to take advantage of all the things that were being offered to us. And I attempted to do that. I used the main reason why I went in was to get the GI Bill and to travel, all the things that young women and men wanted to do.
Yeah.
So when I start thinking about the basis, because you got the sheet of paper that you would fill out and say where you wanted to be stationed at. Child, I wasn't even thinking about going back to Michigan. I wanted to go to Germany because Clifford DeRusso went to Germany, and that had to be a good place if he went there. He was somebody I was dating.
Okay.
I saw him in the last 2 months of my time in Germany. Never looked for him again. I went, got to Germany, and it was a great place. So yeah, it was. Yeah.
How long were you stationed there?
I was stationed there for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and what was your MOS?
It was admin. It was 702.
Okay.
Yes. And then I cross-trained into paralegal.
Okay.
705. Yes.
And is that your advanced degree?
My advanced degree is in higher education.
Okay.
And the goal was to teach at the National Judicial College, which is in Reno, Nevada, where you teach judges. So my background, my work background is I was a court administrator. I was the head, one of the heads of the Aurora Municipal Court here in Colorado for over 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where did you go besides Germany?
I came here.
You came?
I came to Colorado.
Okay.
I was stationed at Lowry Air Force Base when it was a base.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all remember the old Lowry Air Force Base. It was wonderful.
It was, when you drive through there now, you just can't help but think, wow, it's so different now, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
Yeah. So what did you enjoy about Lowry the most?
Well, it was in Colorado. I guess, once I got here, I decided this was going to be my place of residency, and I would be getting my education here. So I began to do all the things that I needed to do to establish residency here in Colorado. And so I knew that it had great educational institution, although I was on the heels of the Vietnam War, so there was still the angst about those that had served. And during that time, so Metro State was where I chose to go to college because my colleagues that were older and wiser indicated that Metro was very receptive to veterans. And so that's where I went to school to get my undergraduate degree.
So did you choose Colorado, or did the Air Force choose it for you?
Well, I worked for the base commander. My boss was the admin officer. That meant we had an in with those that ran the HR department that selected. So there was a lot of teasing when I was picking my selection. I was told that I was going to go to Minot Air Force Base, which was in Hawaii.
Wow.
And I was so excited. And I came back and told my boss, and he said, Z, Minot Air Force Base is in South Dakota, not Hawaii. So there was a lot of harassment and teasing. Every day they would tell me I was going somewhere else. And finally, someone said to me, you should go to Colorado. And I was interviewed for the first class that was accepted in the Air Force Academy, the first class of women, which was in 75.
So you went to the Air Force Academy?
No, I interviewed for it.
Okay.
At the very end of the interview, I asked what it was like, what the journey would be like. And I was basically told that it was like 4 years of basic training. And I then said, you can't take my name off the list because I barely got through basic training. I'm not good at taking orders. And so I decided that that probably was not the place for me. And I often reflect on if that would have been a good fit for me. But because of that, it began to make me think about Colorado. And so I talked to a few friends and I said, maybe I could work at the academy. And you remember, I'm 18, 19, it's all about the party. And so I was told that you don't want to go to Colorado Springs, but you might want to go to Denver. And so that's why I came to Lowry Air Force Base. Yeah. So.
Did you like Lowry?
I did. I liked living in this area. I liked what we stood for. It was a educational institution. So this is where students came for a variety, supply, like avionics. There were several skills that they came here to learn at Lowry. So it was, and so because it was a training institution, a training center, I didn't have to live on base. You definitely lived off base. So, yeah.
So what sort of specialties were you trained in when you
I did at that time. So when I was in Germany, I worked in the admin office, and then I was lent out to the JAGS office because I had an interest in that. And then here I worked in the HR department, and we worked for the head of my little division worked for the head of the HR department, human resources department. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it was personnel management at that time. I think those were the words that we used. Yes.
And did you transfer again, or were you?
No, I stayed
exit?
here, and when I got out of the service, I then went into the reserves, active reserves, which is quite different than reserves now. The reserves so I stayed here and I went into the reserves. I then was sent back to Keesler to be trained as a paralegal. And then I worked so whenever I did my reserve duty, it was at Lowry Air Force Base in the JAGS office.
So that was 1 weekend a month?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And how long did the paralegal training take?
Oh, wow. It seems to me that it was only like 6 weeks, maybe 2 months at the most. Yes.
So
yes,
that would be pretty intense.
It was intense, yes. But it was worth it. It was worth it, yeah.
So when did you get out of the Air Force?
I got out regular active duty in 1979, and then I went directly into the reserves, got out of the reserves in 1985.
Okay. So you were never deployed in any type of combat duty?
The reserves weren't being used in that manner at that time. They weren't. Yeah.
That's good.
That transition came after many different wars, or conflicts.
And how was it for
Code
you?
yellow, echo 1205, code yellow, echo 1205, code yellow, echo 1205.
So that'll be clipped out of the recording.
Okay.
So we were just talking about getting out of the Air Force. What was it like for you to transition back into civilian life?
Well, I don't know so much if I transitioned because I left Lowry and went straight into Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center as a medical secretary.
Okay.
And I worked in the cardiothoracic surgery department, and I transcribed for thoracic surgeons. Okay. So I was still in that military environment immediately after I got out of the military. So it took a while before I transitioned. I was married to an individual that I had also been in the military. Yeah. So.
And did you have your children with that man, or?
Yeah,
you did?
I did. We tried not to talk about it, but we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many children do you have?
I have two. I have two daughters.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were telling me one's a paralegal.
One's a
and the other
paralegal and the other is
is an MD.
yes, she's an emergency room doctor,
Wow.
emergency medicine. Yeah.
Did you have your children at Fitzsimmons?
No.
No.
God, no. No.
I
No.
worked there. Watch out.
No, I did not. I did not. I had my knee surgery at
Okay.
Fitzsimmons, but no, I did not have children there.
Mhm.
No, I just had them on the economy, as we would say. Just
Okay. So, were you still in the military when you had your daughters? Or
No, I was not.
You were out.
I was out.
Okay.
I stressed. I was not active duty. I was in the reserves.
Okay.
And when I had my second child, that's when I parted ways with the military.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to say about your active duty time or your reserve time?
I guess if I had to and give words of wisdom, I really believe, like Israel, everyone should be in the military, at least for 2 years. I think it was a great environment for someone who really maybe lacked direction, but knew that they were smart and bright and it became a resource, if you would. And it allowed me to serve my country while also advancing my own self in some meaningful way. I learned that there was a whole world out there that first and foremost, the military was a place for all of us. You know, everyone that was in my class that joined with me, we came from all parts of the world. We looked different, but we had one goal, and that was to serve our communities. And so I would say that it was a time in my life that I truly enjoyed. I learned a lot about the world. I learned a lot about myself and the possibilities of who I could become as a woman and who I could become as a Black woman. And so I think that it was a moment in my life that I'm really glad that I experienced. And so I compared it to Israel because it is my understanding that it is a country that requires everyone to join the military.
Right.
And so I think there are a few knuckleheads out there that maybe the military could have straightened them out in some meaningful way.
Right.
Since maybe parenting wasn't working for them. So yeah, I think it was a great time in my life.
Did you feel a sense of belonging and equality with other people while you were on active duty?
Oh, don't be confused. There was always racism. You never, and sexism and all the isms that you can imagine. I mean, there's, a colonel never sees himself as an equal to a mere airman. We had a few lieutenants that, boy, it would have been just nice to just bitch slap them into next week because they thought they knew everything and they were the same age as you. And so I was in a technical fighter wing. So we had even more arrogant individuals. They're not doctors, they're pilots. And so they are a different breed of kitty cat too. Yeah. So we had to interact with them a lot. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you do carry yourself very well and very strongly. I can see that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I was trained by some of the best. I mean, my mentors were all white officers, white male officers, and so and they never let you get away with anything. No. I was asked the year, so it was been 76 when Carter was elected. Lieutenant Colonel Hawk who had been shot down in Vietnam and was transitioning from Ramstein to Bitburg and then moving on to the States. So he ended up being in our office. This man looked like Cary Grant, but was mean as a snake. We're having a conversation, and he said something to me, and I looked over and I said, "Excuse me, sir?" And he said, "Well, I'm sure you voted." And I was like, "Of course I didn't vote. Why would I?" And so, I'm typing, but I had looked over my shoulder and said, "No, sir, I didn't vote. Why would I?" The next thing I know, there was a shadow like hanging over me. And it was like, "Young lady, I am disappointed in you. Do you know how many people died to give you the right to vote? And you sat there all cavalier saying that you didn't vote, and you say that with this level of arrogance?" Well, I was 18. I am now 67. I have never not voted for the primaries, the school board. I'm voting, But this was a white man who set me straight. At 18, I couldn't wait to vote. And then it was like the person I wanted to get in didn't get in. So I was like, I'm not doing this again. Now I realize that this country stands on democracy, and it's very important that we do vote.
Yes.
But it's those mentors that told me oftentimes that I was equal, so.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So those are the pearls of wisdom that you pulled from the military.
Yes, and then when I went to school, I majored in, believe it or not, aviation management.
Code yellow. All clear. Code yellow. All clear. Code yellow.
I majored in aviation management at Metro State, and one of the instructors that are there are ex-military pilots, and so their form of teaching was unique in the sense they did. It may be a big thing now, but at the time it was. It may be common now, but at the time it was a big thing. They did a lot of project-driven classes. So you were given a project and you worked. You were given a task, a problem, and then you had to solve that problem with a team that you weren't you weren't used to, and so that training in those classes were unbelievable, and it really allowed me to see that I could take charge of a situation. I could make a decision with good information, listening to others, working with others, disagreeing, but understanding we had one goal and how do we accomplish that goal. Now, the first time I sat in a group with three, four, I think it was 3 young men that were students just like myself. Now, I'm older because I've gone into the military. They're coming straight out of high school. And one of the young men said to me, "Oh, do you mind taking notes?" Yes, I do mind, because one day I too am going to have an assistant. So, and so someone else raised their hand and said they would take notes because he saw that was going to be a problem. And after class, one of the young men said to me, he goes, "Well, his dad is such and such." And I said, "And good for him. Good for him."
That's a great answer.
Yeah, but I thought those classes also were very beneficial to me and the development of who I became as a leader, Yeah, understanding that sometimes you have to make tough decisions. Like there was a young man in one of the groups that I worked in that never did anything. We would say, "Okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you'll work on this." And we would get together, everybody would share their information, and he never, I haven't had a chance to do it. So walking in the hallway, I saw the professor, and I mentioned it, and he said, "What would you do in the real world?" And he goes, Would you come talk to me?" And you're right. That's exactly what I said. I would fire him.
Mhm.
And so he said, well, I guess that's what you're gonna have to do. So I met with the other group, members of the group, and we talked, and I said, well, professor says, we should fire him. That's what I would do.
Mhm.
And we pulled him in and said, hey, we've given you ample opportunities to turn in your part of this project, which is a big deal,
Mhm.
and you haven't done it. You need to find another group. We're
Mhm.
done.
Yeah.
And so, and as tough as that was, that was a reality check for the young man and for us to make a tough
Right.
decision like that. So I learned a lot just from, and again, that still was that gentle hand of the military touching my
Mhm.
life, because those professors, the vast majority of them had been officers in different branches of the military, because they were all pilots,
Mhm.
former pilots.
Yeah. So it sounds like you used the GI Bill very wisely.
I did.
What were your other schools that you went to?
I went to Metro State and got my bachelor's. I got my MBA from the University of Colorado, Denver, and I went to University of Denver. By then, I had used up all my GI Bill. I
Right.
also used my GI Bill just recently, I would say in the last 7 years, to refinance. So I have a 2.25 interest rate.
Good for
So
you.
yeah, I had never used it for the purchasing of a home or anything.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's the VA home
yes,
grant.
yes, and
Yeah.
it's part of the GI Bill. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know that the two were connected.
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So what was your undergraduate, your bachelor's in?
My bachelor's in aviation management
It is.
and business management.
And what about your master's degree?
My master's is a master's of business administration.
Okay.
A master's of business administration. I then turned the corner and went back to the criminal justice world. I wanted to go back to the courts, where working in a world that I was familiar with. So I left the Denver Public Library and worked for the Colorado Judicial Branch.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did you do at the Denver Public Library?
I was I first started as a floater. A young lady and I were for the branches, for this Denver Public Library. I want to be clear about what branch of libraries I worked for. It's the Denver Public Library, and while I had just got out of undergraduate and was working on my master's, I became a floater. So this young lady and I shared a position. And what we did was, I think Denver at the time had 20 plus libraries, branches, and we would go to all those different branches when there was someone absent for a length of time. If a woman had a baby and was going to be off for 6 weeks or 6 months, we would fill in for that individual, either a librarian or a clerk at the door. And then I transferred to the Central Branch, and I worked in their reference area, and they used to have a telephone reference group, and that group was pretty much Google back then. So you would call the library and ask a question, and we would find the answer for you. And there was everything, people getting together, arguing about whether Frank Sinatra was still alive.
I'm glad you can just ask Siri now.
You can just ask somebody now. You can ask your phone, you type it in. But back then, you called the library, because the library was the first place that, if you had telephone numbers that you wanted to find, we would get those telephone numbers for you. And the branch of library is down on Broadway, the large library. I then transferred to publications and newspapers, and those were, again, we had newspapers from all over the country, all the Denver Post, all the Rocky Mountain News, Westword, and then we had Microfiche, all that.
Yeah.
And then I became a department director, and I was over circulation and support services, so the computers and support services.
Computers were very new then.
Yeah, they were very, very new.
Mhm.
And we had systems in place to transfer books from one branch to another for circulation purposes, so that you wouldn't have to come downtown to pick up a book. We could send it to your branch library. And then and I'm doing all of that while I'm working on my master's. I always worked full time. I was married to a salesman. There was no money in that. And he was a salesman that always found a new job. So, I found the one poor white man in America, and I married him. So, so that was my gift to myself. But yeah, so I did that for a while, and then I decided I wanted to go back to the judiciary, and I got a job with the Colorado Judicial Branch, and I worked as a management analyst, and I went to branches and analyzed their systems, whether they were human-driven or systems-driven. And ultimately, I became the department manager for the Denver County Court Traffic Division.
Okay.
And from there, I segued to the position of court administrator, and I became the court administrator for the Aurora Municipal Court. And I was there for 30 years, so I ran the Marshal's Division, the Clerk's Office, the Probation Department, the IT Department, and the detention facility for the city of Aurora. I was one of 4 council appointees that reported directly to the mayor and city council.
And what was your favorite job out of all of those?
I really, truly enjoyed the job that I just left. I just retired from. I was very good at it. I had the ability to impact people's lives. I worked for 11 politicians that pretty much allowed me to run my organization with very little oversight. I was trusted, I was respected, and I made meaningful decisions that impacted people's lives. Whether it was a young person that maybe needed a job during the summer, or it was a system that was a legislative mandate and how were we going to implement it. It was very interesting, very eye-opening of how we were going to transition during COVID.
Right.
Because like everyone else, we shut down, but because of constitutional requirements, we couldn't be shut down for long.
Right.
We began to realize with law enforcement that maybe we didn't need to arrest everybody. And so those were major shifts that when you use the word paradigm shift, those were major shifts that we had never ever seen ourselves doing. That the judge would always have a sheet of paper that she or he signed. We found out that people didn't have to come to court. They could actually be on a screen and we could interact with them. That every interaction with law enforcement didn't need to result in a person going to jail. So those were major shifts that I participate in. And so that gave me a lot of satisfaction. But it also allowed me to truly enjoy retirement. Really understand what retirement is all about.
So I have a question. So during your time at the Aurora Municipal Center, and I just have to give you a little background, I was a drill sergeant.
Okay.
Fitzsimmons was still open, and I had to one time, as a senior drill sergeant, go and pick somebody, a soldier, up from there. So I wondered if you ever encountered any military people doing any one of those jobs, and how did you feel, think, and act on that?
Well, I think one of the struggles that we always have when we're dealing with the criminal justice system is that depending on the lens that you're looking through, you may see the military as being big brother stepping in, and this person maybe not being held accountable to the community that they just have offended. Let's take domestic violence. So I live off the base. That person lives off the base. They commit the crime of domestic violence, meaning he or she, because even though 90% of the cases are male-driven, there are some women that also offend. I'm married, I hit the person. That crime was committed off base. Now, Big Brother steps in as the military, and how do we deal with that person? And so many times that person the military was seen as stepping in where we felt they shouldn't have stepped in, letting the system process accordingly. But I do know that that's the military is going to take care of its own. And let me give you my example. Part of working in the JAG's office when I was in Germany was I was the admin person that assisted Frau Hoffman, Julia Hoffman, who was an attorney, but she was a German citizen. So she was the individual that would go downtown in Bitburg when our guys, and I will say 99.99% of the time, it was a young man, not a woman, that did something bonehead that required that we go downtown in Germany and speak on their behalf. So we understand that. One, I understand now how important to have interpreters because that was her role. She was also the representative for that person so that she could speak directly to the judge, directly to the prosecutors, and get our person off or make sure they were represented appropriately. And typically it was dumb things. It wasn't murder. It wasn't domestic. It usually was they got into a fight. I'm going to show you us Americans, we saved you during the war. I mean, you can imagine all the things that are involved. Something about being an American. We always are the best, and I myself have sometimes been down that dark road myself. We saved your ass. Yes, yes, I've been down that road myself. So yes, we had from two perspectives. One, typically that person was in the jail that I ran, and this other piece was we were dealing with them in the court also. So yeah.
So you kind of saw it from both sides.
Yes.
In other words, being in the military and seeing what happens there in
Yes.
Bitburg.
Yes.
And then being here at the Aurora Municipal Center.
Yes.
So normally we pick up a soldier, always a guy.
Yeah.
In my case, and then the commander would deal with them.
Yes.
And it wasn't always just, but that was the way it worked.
That's right.
And so you got to see both sides, which is very interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I just wanted to get your perspective on it. And
Yeah.
Another question I have is, you seem very, like the military suited you well, despite you maybe thinking it was all about the party.
Yeah.
That's what you wanted. But you kind of bloomed into it, and it was really kind of, seems to me, who you were anyway. Very
Yes.
disciplined, ambitious, goal-oriented. And I heard you say, the military did a lot for you, but, I think it just was a really good fit for you. And I wanted to know what your perspective was on deciding to join the military. Do you think that was a really great decision in your life?
I will say that the piece that probably got me from point A to point B was what happened prior to me joining the military. It was the ROTC piece, okay? If you think the military is tough, imagine being in ROTC and you have a 16-year-old enforcing those same laws, rules, and policies for another 16-year-old. So in some way, you're buying into this discipline, because there's a difference between a 35-year-old that's saying to me as an 18-year-old, these are the rules. I've bought into something when you're in ROTC, because the person that's yelling at me, if I'm just a sergeant and that person's a captain, I'm buying into this person being in charge of me because we're the same age. I'm going to see this person in algebra in about an hour, okay? And how am I going to treat them in algebra? I'm going to give them the same respect I just gave them in my ROTC moment. So that was part of that development there, is that I bought into a system that I knew somebody would be in charge of me. And I would then be in charge of someone else, and I would want them to give me that same respect that I had given that person. Because as I went up the ranks, I became that person.
So you really appreciated the discipline.
That's right.
And understood that it worked both ways.
That's right. And discipline is important whether you're in the military. I also was an athlete, so you had to listen to someone that says you need to do this in order to be better in that 100-meter run. So that discipline helped in all aspects, I think, of my life. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
That
Sure.
was an interesting question.
Yeah.
So when did you get your paralegal training? Was it just when you were in?
When I was in the
initially?
military.
You did?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
And when did you go back into the paralegal world?
Well, it wasn't that I went into the paralegal world. I went back into the world of the judiciary. So, there are 3 branches,
Right.
So I had always worked in what one would say, I had always worked in government. Okay. So I went back to the judiciary. I went to the Colorado Judicial Branch. And so the role that I had would have normally been held by a paralegal. So I worked for the judicial branch, and I worked in the Office of Court Services. And Court Services oversaw a variety of programs. One that we were recently talking about was the implementation of legislation surrounding adoption, open records for
Right.
adoptions. As you know, prior to the late 80s, early 90s, adoption records were sealed. I happened to be one of the individuals that was assigned the duty, the task of making sure the Court Services Division dealt with those that found themselves either looking for records or just having questions about, what they could expect because they had given up an infant.
So you worked both sides of the equation, the parents who gave up the child for adoption and also the adoptees.
That's correct. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more how that went for you and what sort of situations you may have encountered?
Well, they went pretty much how one would understand they would go. Here's a woman that age 16 had a child that for whatever reason, based on religion or just economics, decided that it would be best for the child and themselves to give that child up for adoption. And no judgment. I think everyone has their own journey to take. Now, at age 45, that person is watching the news and hearing that there's a possibility that that child given up almost 30 years ago may knock on their door. And and how does that person deal with that? And so I got those questions, and as well as the person that then called, and they're the person that was given up, that said, I have every right to know who my parents are, and I want to know for medical purposes. I want to know, I want to be able to understand why this person gave me up. So I did field those calls, and they were, as you can imagine, gut-wrenching. And many times you were the person that received the anger, the frustrations, because you were the person answering the phone. So.
Wow. And did you have any that were particularly interesting to you, or any that were particularly difficult for you?
You know, I think I had a conversation with a mother that, you know, I understood, white female who had a relationship with a person that was not of her race, and due to religion, wasn't, and I'm not sure, you know, Roe versus Wade, I'm not sure, I can't remember the year of it. I don't know if at that time it was legal to, I mean, legal or not, people were doing it, but I'm not, she chose to give up the child, and now was married with children, and was very concerned that someone may show up at her door. And she had not had any conversation with her husband of 30 years about this. And so I, you know, even though I was young, I could understand the angst there, and what that meant to her. You know, I could empathize with her, even though I hadn't been in that situation. But I also could empathize with the person that, you know, there are people that are adopted and adopted by incredibly beautiful parents that love them more than life itself. But there is that need to know that I can empathize. Again, I wasn't adopted, but I could empathize with those people wanting to know. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what was your Ph.D. in?
It was in higher
Yes.
education.
Uh-huh.
I taught, I retired again. I taught at the University of Denver at the law school. There's a master's program that focused on judicial administration, pretty much the field that I worked in. And I also taught at the National Judicial College, where they would bring faculty members in to teach courses like a week long or maybe 2 week long, and it would we'd be teaching judges, case management, human resources, a variety of courses. Then we would have judicial officers from other parts of the country, the rural, that would come in to speak to us. I think the last program that I participated in, the group was from Egypt, or from Egypt. And so we taught the class. Many of them spoke English, but we also had interpreters. Yes.
Wow.
So it was, I did that for about 10 years. Yeah. And I did a lot of consulting.
Right.
Anything
That's good.
that has anything to do with education, I've done. Yes.
And you said that you were, I'm trying to get my thoughts together here.
Sure.
Yeah, I just was off track for a minute. I wanted to, I just need to pause. Do you have a question, Suzanne?
Yeah, I want to go back to when you were working and the law had changed, where adoptees, or I think it was open to adoptees, birth parents, or siblings, and you had to be able to prove it somehow if you were from the inside the family. And I mean that like as an adoptee myself, I was from the outside, and I remember going to court in person because I believed in doing everything in person, looking eye to eye with someone. and getting my records. I not only went to the Department of Vital Statistics, but I also went to petition the court.
Okay.
And it was a really good process. It made a lot of people happy, but on the other hand, there was the people that were promised immunity, I'm going to call it, from ever being found out. But I think in the long run, based on my experience, that it did more good than harm from an adoptee's perspective, and then also from a birth mother's perspective. And I met mine. She said, I always figured you'd come walking through the door one day because you can't keep a secret forever. Yeah. And that was 57 years after she gave birth to me. And I asked her if she was happy that I found her, and she said, of course. So I guess what I'm saying is I think, it was more positive, even though there was a lot of upset people, and I would have been upset too, because I would have thought that's a completely private thing, and it wasn't. My birth mother asked me, how did I find her? How did I know, like, the siblings I found were my siblings? And, now with DNA, you don't even need the court system.
That's right. That's true.
And so, things have changed so much that now I'm afraid with the DNA, that's the scary part.
Yeah.
With the law being changed in Colorado, that was more legal, and so you had that ground to stand on.
Sure.
With DNA, you don't have that ground because people can say they don't believe in it. And I just wanted to say that I thought that was a good thing, and I'm so glad that you got to see both sides of it, because many people don't.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it really enhances your understanding of both sides.
Yeah.
And there's another side. There's the adoptive parent side,
Sure.
right? And we never hear their voice usually.
Right.
And my parents were dead when I went to search because I didn't want to disrespect them in any way.
Sure.
But from my understanding of others, about half of them are supportive of their adopted children, wanting to know. It's not that you want a family, you have a family.
Sure. Well, I think my using that illustration is just the far reach of that third branch of government that we sometimes don't understand. And I think and maybe it's one of the things that I reflect on, what is the most powerful branch of government? I mean, they're obviously intertwined, and how important, but many times that particular branch impacts lives in ways that we don't really reflect on.
Yeah,
I mean,
never realize.
you don't think about that, when I think about Brown versus the Board of Education, and Roe v. Wade, there's so many different systems out there that the court touches on. And so in my role as a management analyst, there were programs that were implemented based on legislative mandates that were created by the legislative bodies. And sometimes those decisions are made because my kid got arrested, and I don't want anybody else's kids to get arrested. And the byproduct is now the judiciary has to implement something.
So you alluded a few times to being recently retired.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you what your plans are for your future.
Golf, and more golf.
Okay.
I play a lot of golf.
How many holes in ones have you had?
0. And I don't think that's ever going to be a goal. I don't think that's going to be something that's ever going to happen to me. I had one that came so close that we were all screaming, and then it stopped.
Oh.
The ball stopped. But obviously I was very, very active and still very active in the community. And so I'm on a couple boards, but I retired in 21. And so I decided that in that first year of retirement, first year to 2, that I would not do a lot of boards, because I wanted to just take a deep breath and, exhale. And now I'm finding that my plate's getting filled with a few have snuck in, caught you at a weak moment. You're standing there and they're like, oh yeah, it'd be so nice. And so, so just doing a few boards. I don't have grandchildren. I won't ever have grandchildren because my daughters have been very clear that if I want grandchildren, I need to adopt them.
Okay.
So I am have a lot of grand dogs, and so just enjoying life, really just doing it, meeting great people like Lieutenant Colonel Martha Baker.
And that was the question. How
Yeah.
did you meet Lieutenant Colonel Martha Baker?
Pretty much doing that, volunteer. And I had been asked to speak at a Vietnam, not a Vietnam, but at a Veterans Day event. And because I was a veteran, Walter Huff, a friend and an individual that is a real estate agent and very active in his church, Scott Methodist Church, and he's maybe Scott's AME, but every year he does a program focusing on real estate, talking about veterans and focusing on African American veterans. And the people that attend come from all diversity, and it's just a fun program. It's about 3 or 4 hours long. They feed us extremely well, have really good food, and she and I were in the audience, and I was the speaker. And Walter always pays homage to those that we stand on their shoulders, and so I was just amazed because I was like, wow, you went into the service before I was born. I mean, it's just like, wow. It was just a moment. And being an African-American woman in 1951, she was a Negro, colored woman who had been denied access to a program that had been implemented that she had to pay for in order to be educated as a nurse. And so, so it's those moments that you know that person has paved the way for you. So when she got out of the service, I then went into the service. So she got out in 1972. And I went in 1975. So like as she was leaving that door open for me, I was entering it. And so one must always pay homage to those that have come before us, those women that came before us, as well as those women of color that have come before us.
Yeah.
So they paved the way.
Rite of passage.
That's right.
That you should have.
Yeah.
You strike me as somebody who's very creative internally. Do you feel that you are a very creative person?
I think that my creativity probably comes from a different sense than the regular arts. I'm a patron of the arts. I do, we went to the ballet. I mean, we do a lot of arts. I raised an artist. My paralegal daughter is an artist. I think my art, I dance every form of dancing that you can imagine. I've done all but the Irish jig, that one.
That'll hurt that knee.
Yeah, I haven't done that one, but belly dancing, tap dancing, ballet, modern dance, line dancing, Western line dancing. I've done it all. So in that sense, I believe there's some creativity there, and I can write. I just choose not to.
Okay.
I can write that. Yes.
Okay.
So.
And I was going to ask you about your knee. Did you have an injury on
I had
active duty?
I had an injury in active duty. I fell running some steps, and then it just later on. I mean, I didn't deal with it. I fell,
Right.
and I didn't deal with it. I was more my ego was injured more than anything I thought, and then I fell again. I took a a dive on skating, and it just really and I was leaving the military right then, that second. I mean, I was on terminal leave. I was like out the door. I could see it, I was gone. And I came to Fitzsimmons, and I was talking to the captain. I had him kind of like, he was feeling me. He knew the joy of getting out. And the colonel came up and asked what my issue was, and he was saying, well, she's got a little scar. And the colonel took my leg, pulled it, and was like, I levitated and used some words, sir. What are you doing? And he was like, no, this is torn. She's gonna have surgery. And the next morning I had surgery.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I still am stunned. Yeah.
Are you service connected for that?
No, I need to be, but I need to deal with it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can help
just
you
dealing
with
with
that.
dealing with the military just makes you want to cry just a little bit. Yeah.
I can help you with that.
Please do.
So,
Okay.
yes, we'll
yeah.
do that.
Okay. Thank you.
And what else would you like to tell me about you and your life?
It's been a good life. I mean, it's not at the end, I don't think. I think I got a few more years left. But I've had a good life. I think the military, I have relatives that have military, that have been in the military. My godson attended the Air Force Academy. He went to the preparatory school and then went on. He is a lieutenant colonel pilot. His crown and glory was he flew the Black Knights. They flew over for a Tampa Bay Ravens game. Mm-hmm. He was born in Baltimore. He was born in Denver, but he grew up in Baltimore. He's a Ravens fan, and he flew over the Tampa Bay. So under his what do you call them? The zip up, the green little onesies that they wear. Jumpsuit. Thank you. He had a Ravens shirt.
Okay.
So I'm sure he was out of uniform. Yes. But I think I would say to any young person that may be teetering on trying to find themselves, that the military is still a good option for our young people. So I think that's what I learned, that was a very good option for me. And
yes.
it worked out well for me. So,
yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time. And thank you for your service.
You're welcome. Thank you for your service, Zelda.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure meeting you and
Thank you.
talking with you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Kyle.
you.
Is there some reflection and conclusion questions?
Okay. Yes. What do you wish that more civilians knew about the military service?
I guess if I had to reflect on anything, during someone sent me, and they sent it to me because they knew I had been in the military. And it was right after 9/11, and we had gone off to yet another war. And they sent me a video, and with Lee Greenwood blasting in the background. I'm proud to be an American. And every photo that came up on this video was a white soldier in uniform. Mm. And so if I had to say to anyone anything about the military, is that the military it's like this diverse world that you don't really know who you're standing next to, because right. The diversity of the military really reflects America. I mean, mm-hmm. It truly reflects who we are. So I'm not sure who did this video, mm-hmm. but here was a friend, mm-hmm. a white female, sending me something saying, because I saw this and it brought a tear to my eye, And I thought I would share it with you. And I called her because this person worked for me and said, it was beautiful. And I love Lee Greenwood. I'm proud to be an American. But it saddened me that not one person in that video looked like me.
Right.
Now, I can just quote, maybe not hundreds, but definitely many individuals. Like part of the party in Germany were the Puerto Ricans that came from Philly that we hustled with at every NCO and Airmen's Club. You know, I think about those individuals that, you know, someone in our leadership didn't even know Puerto Rico was a territory. Come on, that makes you cry. So you had all these individuals. I met my first Hopi member of the Hopi Nation. And I still remember Marion talking to us about growing up on the reservation. And there were like 7 of us sitting there like, there are reservations? I mean, there's still reservations? I mean, the world is reflected through the military. And I wish the world understood that. I know that Colonel Baker and my life are enriched by Miss Jeanette, whose husband died in Vietnam, a Black man who saved his members by giving his life. And so that's, if I had to reflect on anything I would say to the American public, the world can be seen through the military eyes. And my war was Vietnam, and no one bought us a cup of coffee. No one thanked us for our service. So I appreciate now that people understand what sacrifices were made during Vietnam, because that group of individuals, many of them did not choose to go to the military willingly. They had to go. They were drafted.
They were.
Those that have come after them now have chose, and I'm not saying that their service is belittled because of that, but I will say that that's a difference than, being told that you have to go. You have to leave your family. You have to do. So I'll get off my soapbox, but yeah.
What do you miss the most about being in the service?
The chow hall. we had great food.
How did you rig that?
We had good food. We did. I think the camaraderie. There was always someone there to pick you up by telling you a dumb joke. There was always someone that was always supportive of you. I was rushing out on a Friday night to go out, and one of my friends had locked the door, and this is in Germany, and I was banging on the door, and someone else was calling me, and when I hit the door like the 4th time, those little window panes that are indoors, I hit it. And it ripped every bit of skin here off.
It's called a degloving accident.
And I went, so my friends were like, oh my God, because it's dripping blood. But it was a Band-Aid, put a Band-Aid on it and let's go. So I was taken to our little small clinic and on the base, and there was one 2-striper there. I had 1 stripe, and young white male, and he said, oh my, and he stitched that. There's no scar.
Right.
He actually put every inch of skin. I must have had like 50 stitches there, and he just took the time on a Friday night. No one there, just him and I, and we just talked about everything. And I didn't get his name, he didn't get my name, and we just went our happy way. But we were young people that were committed to providing the best service we could in every job that we did. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No,
Any more
I think that's
questions
it.
from Suzanne?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you again.
And again, thank you for your service.
Thank
Zelda.
you too.
I
Thank you for
appreciate
your
you.
service.